Everyone wants to feel like they're the best at something, but when that belief turns into taking others for granted, the universe might just teach you a lesson. Understanding that there's always someone better out there is the key to humility. That's what truly makes the strongest person. My name is Mia. I've been married to my husband Thomas for 2 years. When we decided to get married, Thomas mentioned his troublesome sister who might end up being a burden to me. As an only child, I was thrilled at the idea of having a sister, but Thomas's words also made me anxious and curious about what kind of trouble she could be. Now, 2 years into our marriage, I fully understand and have experienced what Thomas meant. I was born into a relatively wealthy family. My father runs a mid-sized trading company and is well-informed and progressive in his thinking. My parents always respected my decisions, providing an environment where I could freely experience and explore my interests. In 2008, during the Lehman Brothers collapse, I was an 11-year-old elementary school student. Intrigued by the significant impact this event had on the world, I became fascinated by how a disruption in the flow of funds could cause such a global panic. This sparked my interest in financial circulation. Recognizing my curiosity and intelligence, my parents had me take an IQ test, and the results were beyond the normal range. Throughout middle and high school, I continued to research finance. In college, I chose a major that allowed me to deepen my understanding. As I learned more, I became eager to apply my knowledge and decided to try day trading. My professor suggested it as a way to experience capital flow firsthand, but warned about careful management to avoid debt. I researched extensively, identifying statistically favorable stocks for day trading. Starting with a modest sum of all the allowance I had saved up, I engaged in buying and selling the same stock within the same day, of starting with the sale and then buying it back before the day ended. This meant results came quickly. My predictions were spot on, and though the increases were modest, my funds grew steadily through this process and gradually increasing my investments. I managed to grow the initial amount by more than 50 times in a year. While the original sum was modest, I wasn't certain how impressive this achievement was on a larger scale. However, that wasn't my primary concern. What mattered most to me was whether the answers I had derived through research were correct. During the university seminar, I met Thomas, a student known for his analytical skills. We often found ourselves in agreement on many topics, which fostered a close bond between us. Following graduation, I had planned to join my father's company, but Thomas pointed out an opportunity at a foreign investment firm on our graduation day. At the subsequent celebration, Thomas confessed his feelings for me, and I immediately accepted. His intelligence was comforting, and his understanding nature put me at ease. As we embarked on our respective career paths, our relationship strengthened. Inspired by the concept of trade at my father's company, I researched foreign companies to gain negotiation advantages and establish a solid foundation for our deals. Meanwhile, Thomas used his analytical prowess to identify profitable investment opportunities, earning high praise within his firm. Despite our busy schedules, we prioritized dates, refreshing each other before diving back into work. Over 5 years, our careers blossomed and our relationship deepened. We became each other's support system, indispensable in our lives. It felt like the perfect time to take the next step forward. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Mia. Will you marry me? Thomas's proposal was met with an immediate and wholehearted acceptance from me. I couldn't wait to begin our life together. During the family meeting, Thomas hesitated before sharing something important. There's something about my sister Alice that you should know, he started cautiously. She's a bit difficult and might cause you some discomfort or inconvenience. Alice, Thomas's younger sister by 2 years, was known to be challenging. From a young age, she had been exceptionally bright, even more so than Thomas, who himself was considered a prodigy. This dynamic made them a notably remarkable pair in their neighborhood. As Alice grew older, her intelligence sometimes translated into a sense of superiority, viewing others as foolish and often looking down even on Thomas. This competitive spirit led her to enroll in a different but equally prestigious university, always boasting that hers was superior to Thomas's choice. In her career, she joined a rival investment and consulting firm, claiming mastery in investment strategies. However, Alice's attitude of superiority left her without close friends and seemingly without a significant other, harboring insecurities behind a brave facade. She believed no man was good enough for her, always striving to prove herself stronger than anyone else. Thomas worried that our engagement might bruise Alice's pride further, knowing her constant need to compete with him. He feared how she might react and was concerned about her attempt to assert dominance. I tried to reassure Thomas with a light-hearted "it's okay," but his worries seemed unending, leaving me even more curious about his intense sister. I finally met the infamous Alice at a family meeting. Her sharp, intelligent beauty was unmistakable, though she exuded a cold demeanor. I wasn't sure if that was just her nature or my own preconceived notions. Thomas's parents were kind and humorous, which put me at ease about getting along with them. Apart from the initial greeting, Alice remained silent, simply eating her meal while watching me, as if assessing me. After the meeting, as everyone was leaving, Alice pulled me aside. "I wondered what kind of person you would be, but you're nothing special, are you?" she remarked coolly. "Just a girl who got a job at her parents' company and is probably slacking off." Stunned, I didn't know how to respond. She continued, "I move large amounts of money and make significant profits. I'm on a completely different level than you. Thomas, settling for someone like you is disappointing. Today's lesson is realizing how much you don't measure up to my standard." With that, Alice left the room, leaving me standing there. When Thomas returned and noticed I hadn't left with Alice, he looked concerned and asked if something had happened. I brushed it off with a laugh, saying it was just a minor jab. He apologized for Alice's rudeness, but I assured him it didn't bother me, though I wondered what would happen the next time we met. Strangely, I found myself looking forward to the wedding. "That'll be interesting," I remarked to Thomas, surprising him. Our wedding was a grand affair, attended by family, friends, and colleagues from both sides. Thomas and I declared our eternal love and enjoyed a wonderful time with our guests. Throughout the event, Alice appeared grumpy and irritated from the start. I had heard from Thomas that Alice had neither friends nor a romantic partner, so I could somewhat understand her feelings, which I found slightly amusing. During a break for a wardrobe change, as I waited for the staff to assist me with my wardrobe change, Alice entered without warning. "This happiness of yours is only for today," she remarked coldly. "A plain woman like you won't get the spotlight. After this, you're just going to leech off Thomas' earnings, aren't you?" I can't understand how anyone could be satisfied with that. On the other hand, I've climbed up on my own. I'm on a completely different level. I'll find someone even better than Thomas and have an even grander wedding. With that rapid-fire monologue, a self-satisfied Alice left without giving me a chance to respond. The staff walked in just as Alice departed, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter at the timing. I quickly apologized to the puzzled staff and began changing. Alice certainly knew how to keep things interesting. Despite our busy weekdays focused on work, Thomas and I cherished our weekends, making the most of our time together. Since the wedding, I had no contact with Alice. I anticipated seeing her next at Christmas when visiting my in-laws, but an unexpected connection with Alice arose sooner. My father sought external consulting for asset preservation and expansion at his company, and although I offered to handle it, he opted for outside expertise from a specific firm. When I heard the firm's name, it struck a familiar chord, but I couldn't quite place it. At the first meeting with the consulting firm, I was taken aback to see Alice among the representatives. The familiarity dawned on me. This was Alice's firm. Alice seemed equally surprised to see me but quickly composed herself and greeted me professionally. It silently became our agreement to act as if we were meeting for the first time, keeping our sister-in-law relationship a secret from the other team members. When I told Thomas about the encounter at home, he surprised me by saying Alice had already called him. "This is ridiculous. I can't work with her, she was just complaining," he said, suggesting I might want to step away from the project. I found the situation amusing and laughed it off, but I knew I had to remain professional. During the meeting, I pointed out flaws and inadequacies in their proposals, backing my arguments with perfect logic. My counter-arguments unsettled them. Alice tried to fight back with past examples and mathematical evidence, but I skillfully exposed their weak points, leaving them silenced. The meeting ended in my favor, with the other team agreeing to prepare a second proposal for the next meeting. As I relaxed with coffee after they left, I received a phone call meant for me. It was Alice. "Today, you might have gotten the better of me, but I won't let it end like this," she declared. "Someone as excellent as me can't be bested by you. You're just running wild, carrying everything on your own, Mia." Amused, I replied calmly, "Alice, you need to rely on your colleagues and work together to make progress." "What gives you the right to lecture me?" she snapped. "I don't need guidance from someone like you." With that parting shot, she hung up. I burst out laughing, still holding the phone, drawing curious glances from nearby colleagues. From then on, I took full control of the meetings. Their teams scrambled to respond to my points, often finding themselves in a defensive position. Alice tried desperately for a comeback, but always fell short. Her frustration was plainly visible, though she managed to maintain her composure. Reflecting on this with Thomas later, he mentioned, "Alice has never been outdone by anyone before. Plus, Mom told me Alice found out that a guy she liked already had a girlfriend and got rejected before even confessing. That's probably adding to her irritation." I couldn't help but let out a surprised "huh" and stifle my laughter as the consulting project finally concluded successfully. The opposing team leader thanked us, expressing how much they had learned, and we all dispersed. As everyone left, Alice and I ended up alone. "I'm not satisfied with how things went. I'll make sure to get the better of you next time," Alice declared, her tone sharp. "Just so you know, I'm more excellent. I even bought a tower mansion at my age. Only someone as outstanding as me could afford a brand new tower mansion." Alice had made waves as an investor and had managed to earn enough for such a purchase. "We'll toast among the elites," looking down on the commoners below. "You, as one of those ordinary people, should just look up and despair," she added, leaving after her piece as usual. Thomas confirmed that Alice's claims were true. She had indeed found success as an investor and recently purchased a tower mansion to live in on her own. Alice was undeniably talented, and such an achievement was well within her reach. While luck played a part, I genuinely wanted to congratulate her. A few days later, during the weekend, I had business at a tower mansion. As I stopped at a mid-level floor, a door opened, and to my surprise, the resident stepping out was Alice. We locked eyes and both exclaimed in surprise. "Why are you here? If you're not invited to the party, did you come to clean?" I blurted out. Alice chuckled. "It seems today is the day of my celebrity home party, but no, not at all. I'm here to deliver something to an acquaintance on this floor." "You have an acquaintance here? And you came down from where?" I asked, puzzled. "My home is on the top floor of this mansion. Naturally, I had to come down," Alice explained matter-of-factly. "But you and Thomas live in a single-story house, don't you? How can you have a home here?" I countered, bewildered. "Thomas can't handle heights. That's why our house is single-story," Alice replied calmly. "This place is my office and workshop." "Your workshop is on the top floor of a tower mansion. Don't joke like that," I said incredulously. "This whole place is mine," Alice stated firmly. "Why shouldn't I use the top floor?" As we argued loudly in the hallway, a voice behind us interrupted. "Alice, what's going on?" Alice turned and apologized. "Sorry, Senior." The woman who had spoken and 3 others looked at us with concern. "I apologize for not greeting you downstairs. I was just dealing with—" Alice seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The woman Alice called Senior looked at me, searching her memory, and then exclaimed in surprise, "Aren't you Mrs. Mia, our new external board director starting this month?" Alice was speechless at this unexpected revelation. The senior continued, "She's also known as the investment goddess whom Alice admires." Clearly bewildered, Alice struggled to comprehend what was being said. I had started day trading as a student, gradually progressing to more serious investing. Using my day trading earnings, I learned investment strategies through practice. My analytical and research skills helped me identify companies with growth potential, and I invested wisely. The funds I managed grew rapidly. My father provided me with the freedom to use a piece of land he owned in the city center, where I began building a tower mansion, following the trend of mansion investments. I wanted to understand what it was all about, so this tower mansion is the result of my efforts. Managing a mansion is more challenging than it seems. Income comes from rent, but maintenance costs and taxes are higher than expected. Furthermore, even a few delayed rent payments from tenants can disrupt smooth management. Regarding being called the investment goddess, that seems to be a recent label for me, coined due to my extraordinary success in investments. Hearing that Alice admired me was a surprise. Alice was too stunned to keep up with the unfolding situation. "That's why my room is on the top floor here," I explained. "I own a significant share of your company, which made me a board director." Alice was overwhelmed by this unexpected turn of events. Moreover, Alice, while extremely talented, has a poor reputation regarding teamwork and attitude towards colleagues. If she can improve, she can continue in her current role. Alice was already reeling from this harsh reality, kneeling and collapsing on the floor. Later, Thomas told me that Alice, once a fierce wolf, had become a small dog. It seemed she finally understood that there's always someone above her. I had never really paid much attention to Alice's antics, knowing we were on different levels. But looking back, I do feel a bit guilty for finding it all so amusing. Reflecting on my previous attitude, I realize I still have a lot to learn. Alice, having stepped back from the limelight, now faces reduced income and a string of losses in investments. Her ability to pay rent for the Tower Mansion apartment is increasingly compromised. I'm considering issuing an eviction notice if the rent arrears continue for another 2 months. People's abilities vary, and even similar skills can differ in levels. Alice has become a lesson for me to never underestimate anyone and to treat others with respect. Thomas apologized for not being more involved in these events, but it's not his responsibility at all. His concern shows his good nature, and I love him all the more for it. My current hope is to start a family with Thomas soon. I can't wait to enjoy life as a family of 3. If Alice changes her mindset and broadens her perspective, she'll surely find friends and a partner soon. One night, I had a dream of a family of 3, but by the end of next year, we'd be a family of 5 with triplets. I woke up sweating but couldn't help laughing at the prospect. In the hospital for just a fracture. Pause. Acting like a child. You need to pull yourself together. Get up and make dinner, or else. We're done. How could anyone react that way to news of their wife in the hospital instead of expressing worry first? Most wouldn't get it, but this is my husband. I can't handle it anymore. I was at my wit's end, but there was someone even angrier with my husband than I was. That turned out to be his own parents. I wonder how he'll respond when they intervene. I'm Eileen, 29 years old. I landed a job at a well-regarded company right after finishing college, even though I don't work at the main office. My salary's quite good. My husband Matt is 32. We met at a client's office, and after a few meetings, he took the initiative to swap numbers. He later invited me to dinner, and after dating for 1.5 years, we took the plunge when he proposed. Looking me in the eye, he said, "I want to spend my life with you. Eileen, will you marry me? I'm happy, but are you sure about us?" "I want you, Eileen. You're the only one who makes me feel truly happy when we're together, Matt. Thank you. I want to spend my life with you, too." We were showered with blessings at our wedding and pledged to love each other forever. But 2 years later, if asked if love still exists between us, we couldn't confidently say yes. The reason is simple. Matt has changed in these 2 years. It started with something small. Since we got married, he began gradually shifting household responsibilities to me. We had agreed to split chores evenly, since we were both working before we got married. Despite this, Matt had stopped doing his share of chores like cleaning the bathroom and washing the dishes. Initially, he would reluctantly do them when I reminded him, but gradually, he stopped doing them altogether, even when asked. This increased my workload. Over time, extra hours at work piled up, eating into my sleep. Exhausted both mentally and physically, I decided to talk to Matt about it. When I got home, he was already lounging on the couch with a beer in hand. He didn't even acknowledge me. Despite my frustration, I approached calmly. "Hey, Matt, there's something we need to discuss." Keeping his eyes fixed on the TV, he replied, "What is it?" I took the remote from his hand and turned off the TV. "Hey, what are you doing?" "I was watching that." My husband jumped up, raising his voice. "I told you I wanted to talk, right? It's important. Please listen." "What a bother. So what's this about?" "I'm not exactly swimming in free time, you know." "Free time? You've been glued to the TV and drinking beer." Holding back the urge to yell, I kept my cool and pressed on. "Matt, you haven't been pitching in around the house lately, have you?" "Why not? We agreed to share chores since we both work, didn't we?" "Isn't it obvious? Doing housework isn't my job." "What do you mean? Cleaning the bathroom and doing dishes were your responsibilities, weren't they? Why should I, as a husband, have to do that?" Those tasks are for women. Wait, are you serious? You were the one who suggested we split the chores. That was just for show to look like a good husband, isn't it clear? At our wedding, you've even told everyone. I'm so lucky my husband helps. Around the house, that was the whole point. Haha. So, you're saying you only helped out to improve your image during the wedding? With a smirk, my husband said, exactly. I was stunned by my husband's words, unable to comprehend such audacity. I'm exhausted from working late too. After getting home later than you, how could you say something like that to me? Just a reminder, you're not exactly a beauty queen, okay? What? Why are you bringing this up now? What does my appearance have to do with this discussion? Someone as ordinary as me should be grateful to have married someone like you. You're complaining about simple chores? Know your place. Matt, my husband, shouted and turned on the TV without waiting for my response. He took a sip of his half-empty beer and casually shifted his focus away from me. I couldn't believe it. I'm working late too, so how could he say such things? No matter how I look at it, that's just wrong. I wanted to say a lot, but speaking up now would only lead to a fight. To calm myself, I went straight to bed after taking a bath that night. Since then, I tried repeatedly to talk to Matt, but was always brushed off. Every attempt at conversation was met with, "Don't tell me what to do," leaving no room for discussion. It seemed Matt avoided me, often leaving the house on his days off. Naturally, he neglected housework, even on my days off, leaving me to handle it all at once. Time passed, and as my job entered a busy period, my overtime hours increased significantly. Then Matt exploded again in anger. "Hey, do you know what time it is? Where's my dinner?" Matt started yelling the moment I returned home after a 3-hour overtime shift. "I told you this morning I'd be working late today, so you should either cook or get takeout." "What? Are you serious? Why do I have to cook? I wouldn't mind takeout, but do we even have money for that? Are you going to pay? Why should I? I'm busy too, so can you help out a bit?" The mention of busy seemed to trigger him. He kicked the table leg and snapped at me with a furious look. "I don't care if you're busy. You're always doing overtime because you can't manage your time. It's not that. My workload at work is really heavy right now. Don't act like you're all that just because you can handle a bit of work. You should just do what I tell you, you foolish woman." From that day on, I kept my distance from Matt to avoid his scolding. I prepared dinner ahead of time on days I knew I'd be working late. I also took on all the housework on my days off. Looking back, maybe I should have left him right then and there. But even then, I couldn't bring myself to truly hate him. Living like this, my burden gradually became too much to bear. After 2 months, both my body and mind were exhausted, and I lost my motivation for work. One day, on my way to work, I slipped on the subway stairs and fell. Though I remained conscious, I lay immobile, ripped by pain, and had to be transported by ambulance. Even upon reaching the hospital, the agony persisted, restricting my movement. After completing all the tests, the doctor entered my room and said, "You fractured your leg and have bruises on your arm and back. You must be in a lot of pain." "Yes, I can't move as freely as I'd like. You may be in this state for a few days. You look pale. Have you been feeling tired?" Anyway, I'll need to stay in the hospital for a while. Should I inform my family?" "Yes, please do." As I checked my phone, a message from a colleague awaited me. They had witnessed the ambulance taking me away from the subway station. They had already informed my workplace and contacted Matt, my husband. Exhausted from the day's events, relief washed over me, and I drifted into a deep sleep. Hours later, my phone buzzed, waking me up. Matt's name lit up the screen. Perhaps he was calling out of concern. With a mix of curiosity and apprehension, I answered, "Hello." "Hey, where have you been? Come home right now." Confused by Matt's raised voice, I couldn't hide my confusion. "Wait, didn't you hear? What's going on?" "I had an accident at the station. I'm in the hospital now. I fractured my leg and they're admitting me." After a brief silence, he exploded. Are you kidding me? Hospitalized? You're not using this as an excuse to avoid doing chores, are you? What? No. Why would I lie about something like this? Didn't the office contact you? No calls came through. Even if you're trying to trick me, it won't work. And even if it's true, it's not my problem. Just come back and make dinner, all right? What? Hold on, Matt. My words were cut off as he abruptly ended the call. How could he be so dismissive? Isn't it normal to be concerned when your spouse is hospitalized? Am I just here for Matt to delegate chores to? Exhausted, I lay back down on the bed. A message from Matt popped up on my phone. If you're not coming home, I'll order takeout. You're paying. As soon as I read the stark, emotionless message, clarity washed over me. It was foolish to dwell on this any longer. Just as I was contemplating divorce, there came a knock on my hospital room door. When I saw who entered, I couldn't believe my eyes. My father-in-law and mother-in-law? What are you doing here? My in-laws lived far away and hadn't been close to Matt for some time. After we got married, I rarely saw them, maybe once a year at most. Their unexpected presence baffled me. Seeing my confusion, my mother-in-law spoke gently. Eileen, we heard you were taken to the hospital in an ambulance. We were worried. How did you find out? We received a call from your office. Huh. But my office tried to reach Matt several times before contacting you. He didn't answer any calls, so they reached out to his childhood home, which was listed as an emergency contact. That's why you're here. Their unexpected kindness brought tears to my eyes. I was genuinely touched that they had come all this way out of concern for me. Holding back my emotions, I gratefully lowered my head to Matt's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, thank you so much. It's all right, dear. We're family. But where is Matt? You mean he hasn't arrived? No. They seemed surprised by my answer. Just then, my phone rang. It was Matt calling. Hello. What's wrong with you? Are you really not planning to come back? Matt's sudden outburst caught Mr. and Mrs. Johnson off guard, and they exchanged worried glances. I gestured for them to stay quiet, placing my finger on my lips. They nodded silently, and I responded to Matt. I've been admitted to the hospital. I won't be able to come home for a few days. Hospitalized for a fracture. Stop being so delicate. Get yourself out of there and make some food. Mrs. Johnson looked ready to protest, but Mr. Johnson held her back. Matt continued ranting, unaware his parents were listening. Just so you know, if you don't, we're getting a divorce, okay? A divorce? Are you serious? Of course. Why wouldn't I be? There's no reason to stay with someone like you who not only lacks attractiveness, but also neglects their household duties. Haha. His laughter over the phone left me speechless, stunned by his callousness. Isn't this going too far? He had always belittled others. I had to respond. Hey, are you serious saying things like that? Your parents are furious. What are you talking about? His response was light-hearted, as if he thought it was a joke. I handed my phone to my in-laws and let them take over. They unleashed a fierce reprimand through the phone. Matt, how could you say such things to Eileen? How can you be so heartless when your wife is in the hospital? We don't even recognize you as our son anymore. You're disowned. Wait, hold on. It's not what you think. There's a reason for this. There's no excuse for your behavior. All you do is spew venom. I'm ashamed to call you my son. Apologize to Eileen right now. Feeling cornered by his parents, my husband suddenly turned on me. Eileen, enough. Using my mom and dad like this. Exploiting them. It's your fault for not answering your company's call, isn't it? That's why they had to get involved. They called that number from your office. How misleading. Fine, I'll divorce you. Are you okay with that? I released all the pent-up anger and resentment, standing my ground. Divorce? Bring it on. I want nothing to do with a man like you. How long will you continue to think you're above everyone else? I have no reason to stay married to you anymore. If you understand that, never show your face to me again. Get lost, you piece of garbage. Following the divorce from my husband Matt, he initially hesitated, but with the help of my in-laws recommending a divorce attorney, we managed to separate amicably. The divorce brought significant changes to Matt's life. He began eating out for every meal, and his health declined. Unable to manage his laundry, I heard he showed up to work in wrinkled suits and shirts. Consequently, his reputation among coworkers took a nosedive. Did you hear? He didn't even visit his wife in the hospital. That's pretty messed up. Well, no wonder she left him. Ha ha ha. Over time, Matt began to skip work without giving any notice. With no one supporting him, it seemed inevitable that he would soon be pushed to resign. On the contrary, I was discharged from the hospital and returned to my usual work routine. Despite now being divorced, my job kept me occupied, lessening the impact more than I had anticipated. Moving forward, if I have the chance to meet someone new, I'll carefully evaluate them to ensure I find genuine happiness next time. Unlimited access to the spa from now on. How could John keep this a secret? It's just evil, unforgivable. Without my knowledge, my in-laws' place had transformed into a luxury hotel. Now, I can enjoy the spa every day and indulge in delicious meals. But kidding aside, the thought of them using my precious son for their own desires, it's outrageous. They better be ready. My name is Amy, a 35-year-old office worker in the administrative department of a pharmacy. I live with my husband John and our first-grade son Edward. John and I met through a colleague at work, and from the moment we met, we clicked. We quickly became close, started dating, and were married the following year. With my upbeat husband John and lively son Edward, I was leading a life of ordinary happiness. Another thing that makes me glad I married John is having his mother-in-law Renda in our lives. Having lost my mother early, I was raised by my father. My mother-in-law, who I barely knew as a mother figure, treated me like her own daughter since the start of our marriage. "Amy, do you have any plans this Sunday? Why don't you and Edward come over for dinner?" she would say, always treating us to delicious meals. When Edward was younger, she was a great support for my parenting struggles, even helping to pick him up from daycare when I couldn't leave work. Edward grew very attached to her, and spending Christmas at my in-laws had become a tradition for our family. "Amy, your mother-in-law really is the best, isn't she?" my colleague Emma would say, listening with an envious look. It was Emma who introduced me to John. They had been friends since college. Emma, with her bright personality and many friends, joined the company with me. We were close enough to share work frustrations, family matters, and personal issues. The pharmacists and other staff were kind, and the company had excellent benefits. Emma and other colleagues with children continued to work full-time as before our pregnancies. Recently, John's been saying he has to work on weekends and isn't home even on his days off, I said, sounding a bit discontented. "Are you suspecting him of cheating?" Emma laughed. "That's laughable." But it was true. John had been away from home more often. "Dad, are you working again today?" Edward asked, wanting to play with John. "I have to work, sorry," John said apologetically. I couldn't say anything back, feeling proud of John for working hard for our family. Little did I know back then that such dedication would turn into such a terrible betrayal. Rock, paper, scissors. Oh, the worst, I sighed. My workplace is usually closed on Sundays and holidays, but about once a month, we're on duty for the hospital gate on Sundays. Accordingly, our pharmacy also opens. It seems Christmas is our turn this time. We played rock, paper, scissors to decide who would work. Unfortunately, I lost. I wanted to spend Christmas at my in-laws, but no choice. "I have to do my best," I muttered to myself, only to be chuckled at by the friend sitting next to me. "It's not funny," I said to her. She laughed and apologized. "Sorry. This woman is also an officer, and we met at the daycare. Her son Henry and Edward are very close, and our families have become friends. We used to go on trips together, though we've been too busy lately. Her husband Tom is also a kind and gentle person. Her name is Isabella. I call her Henry's mom, or Isabella. By the way, Isabella, thanks for playing with Edward in the park last Sunday when I had to work. When John had to take care of Edward on weekends, today I played with Henry in the park," Edward told me. When I asked John about it, he said he ran into Henry and his parents at the park by chance and played together. "Really?" I asked John, but his vague response frustrated me. "By the way, mother-in-law called and said she's looking forward to Christmas. I can't make it, but have fun. I can't go because of work, so it looks like Christmas will be without me this year," I told Isabella. Mother-in-law sounded very disappointed when I told her I couldn't come, but maybe I'll put John to work and have him do a thorough house cleaning. "It's been a while," she said, sounding quite excited about the idea. "Feel free to use him as much as you like," I laughed as I talked with mother-in-law. It was close to Christmas when this happened. I was working a late shift that day and had to do some unexpected overtime. I hurriedly tried to contact John but couldn't reach him. I ended up calling my son's mobile phone. "Mom, are you done with work?" Edward answered the phone with a cheerful voice, happy to hear from me. Sorry, Edward, Mom is working late. Can you put Dad on the phone? But Edward said John wasn't there. Wondering where they could be, I said, Hello, Amy. It must be tough working so late. John called and said he's going to be late because of work, Mother-in-law said. Hello, Amy. It must be tough working so late. John called and said he's going to be late because of work, Mother-in-law said. She told me that while she was preparing dinner in her house. John called her, Sorry, Mom. Amy's on a late shift and I should get home early, but I have to work overtime. Please help. After saying that, John hung up and couldn't be reached again. I was furious with John's actions. He hadn't contacted me at all, thinking maybe he wouldn't get caught. I rushed home. John still hadn't returned, and at the dinner table were Mother-in-law and Edward, eating. Mother-in-law said she was happy to have dinner alone with her grandson. Even though I apologize, I really respect Mother-in-law. John came home late that night. Hey, about work, you promised to take care of things when I have a late shift. Can you at least keep that promise? I said quietly, What can I do? It's work, I muttered to myself. John raised his voice and even suggested that I quit my job or become a part-timer. When John met me, he praised me for working in healthcare, but that John who said such nice things is no longer here. Our current lifestyle is also thanks to my income. Even though I'm an equal partner to John, he's been doing less housework lately and hasn't been taking care of Edward either. And this guy, hey, you're not cheating, are you? I looked at John with cold eyes. There's no way. You're overthinking, Amy. He suddenly changed his tone and put his arm around my shoulder. That said it all. John has always tried to appease me like this when he's lying or feeling guilty. How dare he cheat? He better be prepared. I was glad Edward was asleep. I didn't want to show our son such an ugly fight. From then on, we acted normal in front of Edward, but when it was just the two of us, we hardly talked or even made eye contact. When I told my colleague Emma about what happened, she said, That guy is the worst. Let me know if you need anything. That was a cool thing to say. Days passed, and before I knew it, it was Christmas Eve. Take good care of Edward, will you? Say hello to Renda for me, I said to John, but as usual, he didn't even meet my eyes. I'm off then, he replied indifferently, and John and Edward left for my in-laws' house. What's with that attitude? It's so annoying, I thought to myself. I spent a lonely Christmas Eve alone in our eerily quiet house. There was no contact from John, but thinking he was having a good time with Mother-in-law gave me a little peace of mind. I remembered Mother-in-law saying she'd make John clean the house. I wondered if he was being worn out by chores and couldn't help but feel a bit of schadenfreude. Little did I know John was doing something unthinkable at that time. Christmas Day was busy with quite a few patients. Fortunately, I didn't have to work overtime, so I left work and went straight home. I planned to join my in-laws the next afternoon and spend the holiday with Mother-in-law. Might as well enjoy some alone time for a change. As I was thinking this, my mobile phone rang. It was Mother-in-law. Thinking it was going to be a complaint about John being lazy, I answered, Amy, Merry Christmas. You must be tired from working on Christmas. You did great. Mother-in-law's voice sounded kind, not irritated at all. Merry Christmas, Renda. I wish I could have spent it with you too. Is Edward just playing games? When I asked, Mother-in-law fell silent. Even after calling Renda's name a few times, there was no response. I wondered if it was a bad signal. Amy, John and Edward didn't come here this year. I spent Christmas alone, Mother-in-law finally said, and then began to sob over the phone. I was in a panic. John and Edward definitely left the house yesterday. Where could they possibly be now? There was a long silence between Mother-in-law and me. I'll head over to your place right now, I said. It's about a 40-minute drive to my in-laws. On the way, my mind was filled with thoughts of Edward. What if they were involved in an accident or some incident? These worries spun in my head. When I arrived at my in-laws, Mother-in-law was already waiting outside. As soon as she got into my car, I asked quietly, Should we call the police? Mother-in-law slowly shook her head. As I wondered why, Mother-in-law began to speak. Amy, I'm really sorry about my stupid son. Do you think John is having an affair? Mother-in-law looked at me with teary eyes, and I almost started crying too. What? Actually, that's when I remembered something and hurriedly drove to a certain place. When we reached our destination, I called Edward's mobile phone. Hello? Is Dad nearby? I asked. Yeah, he's here. Come quickly, Mom, Edward answered immediately. Even though we have been apart for only a day, Edward's voice sounded dear to me. What is it, Amy? I'm busy right now. I heard John's voice on the phone, sounding like he wanted to end the call. Immediately, hearing that voice made me feel intense loathing, wanting to confront him. Brenda, you said something about making him clean, right? So, are you at your parents' house now? John's response on the phone was calm. Yeah, that's right, Amy. I can't wait to see you. When did he become so adept at lying as easily as breathing? I thought to myself, should I have quit my job? Should I have tried harder at home? But none of that justifies an affair. Oh, so Brenda, you started a luxury hotel. Does that mean unlimited spa access? How could John keep this a secret? I won't forgive him, I said in a low tone filled with hatred. On the phone, John seemed quite flustered by my accusation. His silence prompted me to continue. Hey, come out of the room. This is the luxury hotel I always wanted to visit. You said it was too expensive, remember? As I spoke fluently, John seemed to give up. I'm sorry, he said in a barely audible voice. I found this place using the GPS on Edward's mobile phone. This hotel, not far from my in-laws, was the place I wanted to visit. The fact that John, who said it was too expensive for me, was enjoying himself here with his mistress infuriated me. Perhaps it showed on my face because on the way to the hotel, mother-in-law kept apologizing. It was then that I found out for the first time that when I worked late shifts, mother-in-law was almost always the one taking care of Edward. I hadn't noticed because she would return home before I got back. John, who was terrible at cooking, used to buy ready-made food, and if mother-in-law tried to cook, he stubbornly refused her. Looking back, that must have been a strategy to keep me from finding out. Even during that short time, John was so enthralled with his mistress. Mother-in-law initially believed John was really working, but as his absences increased, her suspicions of an affair naturally grew. The climax was when mother-in-law saw John walking arm in arm with an unknown woman, looking intimate. She debated whether to consult me but decided against it. The main reason was that she didn't want to lose the chance to see Amy and Edward. Mother-in-law sobbed in the passenger seat, knowing she cared so much for us. Tears streamed down my cheeks too. Mother-in-law was more considerate of me and Edward than John ever was. This time, John had contacted her, saying he would spend some rare time alone with Edward, but asked her to cover for him, saying he'd be at her house. Mother-in-law, suspecting a lie, worried about Edward and contacted me. I despised John from the bottom of my heart for involving so many people, I thought bitterly. At the hotel, after explaining the situation, we were made to wait in the lobby. Then, a man and a woman with guilty expressions on their faces emerged, along with Mom. I was getting bored. I played a law with Henry, who was Edward's friend from daycare. Henry looked around and said, "Looks like my dad hasn't arrived yet." He seemed a bit disappointed. John's mistress was Isabella, another mom from the daycare. I wasn't sure how long the affair had been going on, but these two fools had boldly involved our children. Apparently, they had told their sons that their respective parents would join them later. How despicable. John had booked 2 rooms, one for the children and the other for themselves. So repulsive. Thanks to the hotel's kindness, mother-in-law and I were allowed to stay in a room for a while, where she looked after the children in the other room. Isabella having an affair with my husband and then talking to me normally at committee meetings was unbelievable. I spoke in a calm tone. What I thought Amy hadn't noticed anything. It was so funny. Isabella laughed. What is this woman? I never would have guessed that Isabella, who seemed so fragile and beautiful, was actually this spiteful. I stared at her quietly, pondering the unpredictability of people. John himself seemed a bit taken aback by Isabella's true nature. This woman, without being asked, happily began to talk about how and when she started her affair with John. Their relationship began when our children were in senior kindergarten. On a day I was sick and couldn't attend a parent meeting, so I asked John to go in my place. It was Isabella who made the first move. We had known each other as families and had each other's contact information. From that day on, they began to communicate more frequently. It started with complaints about their spouses but gradually turned into personal conversations. Soon, they began meeting more often, and it didn't take long for their relationship to become romantic. But now it's all over. What a pity, Isabella chuckled, her nonchalant attitude heard loud and clear. I said. You seem quite relaxed for someone about to face serious consequences. Ignoring her surprised look, I stood up decisively, facing my bewildered husband. I said, "Come on, get up and check out. I've called a ride for you, so get ready quickly," I said with a slight smile as I left the room. Seeing Isabella's face twitch a bit from my remark felt oddly satisfying. Now begins the hellish drive. The trip isn't over until we're home, I thought to myself. After checking out, as we headed to the parking lot, Henry ran joyfully towards the person he was waiting for, Henry's dad, Tom, Isabella's husband. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Henry. Have you been good?" Tom said in his usual calm manner. "Dad, can Edward and I go home first? Mom and you need to talk," Henry said gently, and the two boys happily got into my car. "Thank you. We'll have a long talk on the way home," I said, glaring at Isabella. I had learned from contacting Tom that he was supposedly at work and Isabella had lied about visiting her parents far away to come here. Both of them were utterly despicable. I was forced to come here because John threatened to use Edward to ostracize Henry at school if I didn't. Isabella started with a shallow lie. "Really? You seemed so eager to tell me everything just a while ago," I continued calmly. Isabella laughed. "What is this woman?" I thought, staring at her quietly, pondering the unpredictability of people. John himself seemed taken aback by Isabella's true nature. She happily began to talk about how and when she started her affair with John, and it was unbelievable to hear. Their relationship began when our children were in senior kindergarten. On a day I was sick and couldn't attend a parent meeting, so I asked John to go in my place. It was Isabella who made the first move. We had known each other as families and had each other's contact information. From that day on, they began to communicate more frequently. It started with complaints about their spouses but gradually turned into personal conversations. Soon, they began meeting more often, and it didn't take long for their relationship to become romantic. But now it's all over. "What a pity," Isabella chuckled with a nonchalant attitude. I said, "You seem quite relaxed for someone about to face serious consequences." I ignored her surprised look, standing up decisively, facing my bewildered husband. I placed the voice recorder with our earlier conversation in Tom's hand as Isabella desperately tried to grab it. "Don't bother. I have another copy just for myself," I said, smiling as I got into my car. As I drove away, John's pathetic voice called out from behind, "Wait, what am I supposed to do now? Go home alone? Oh, but I thought you might feel lonely, so I arranged a ride for you too." I pointed behind John. Behind him stood my colleague Emma and her husband, who was also a friend from college. Apparently, John owed him a big favor and couldn't stand up to him. I glanced over and saw they were already scolding him. Emma gave me a look that said, "Leave it to me." Though my husband was a disappointment, I was lucky to have supportive people around me. As I expected, everyone's ride home was hellish. Isabella desperately denied her relationship with John in the car, but no one believed her with the voice recorder playing. Eventually, she admitted to having other affairs. I don't know if John was serious, but he was the one being played from the start. The reason Isabella targeted John was so petty because Edward got the lead role in a school play over Henry. I was furious. I planned to make him pay a hefty alimony. Henry's custody went to Tom, of course. He said he was going back to his parents' place, a bit far away. John came home late that night, looking like a ghost. It seems like he got a good scolding from Emma and her husband. John always said his college friends were very important to him, as if it were a mantra from the beginning of our marriage. Now, because of this incident, John probably won't be invited to their gatherings anymore. It's nothing but karma. He brought this upon himself. He should regret it. What angered me the most was that every time he met his mistress, John told Edward, "Today it's a secret between us men, okay? Don't tell Mom." Edward kept that promise and never told me anything. When I found out, I was moved to tears. John and I successfully finalized our divorce. "You stupid man, how can you face your late father now? Don't ever show your face again," mother-in-law said, slapping him. John finally realized the gravity of his actions and cried like a child. But my heart didn't waver. Afterward, John requested a transfer to a branch outside the prefecture. He paid the alimony and is keeping up with child support. As for me and Edward, we're living with mother-in-law at her place. I considered returning to my parents' home, but my father has remarried and has a new family. Living together would be impossible. Mother-in-law suggested we stay with her until our lives stabilize. People are often surprised by our unique relationship. But I still cherish mother-in-law like my real mother. I hesitated about what to call her, but I still call her Renda. We're keeping it a secret, but we plan to celebrate her 60th birthday at that hotel. I splurged and booked the most expensive room. This should turn the unpleasant memories into enjoyable ones. My job became far, and Edward had to transfer schools, but Tom's parents lived near our former in-laws, so the boys ended up in the same school again. That was a surprise. Once things settle down, I might rent an apartment near work. But for now, I want to cherish the